All right, so you've brought some really fascinating stuff for us to unpack today.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting area.
Yeah, digging into this possible link between uh, uh, essential tremor and dementia. All this stuff coming from tremor.today.
Right.
It really makes you think.
Yeah.
Uh, so today, in this deep dive, we really want to get to the bottom of what these sources are telling us about how essential tremor, we often call it ET,
Yeah.
might be linked to dementia.
Right. And it's definitely a question that comes up a lot,
Okay.
and for good reason.
Yeah.
So just to make sure everyone's on the same page, essential tremor, or ET, like you said, it's mainly a neurological thing, and what we see is that rhythmic shaking, right?
Right.
Most often in the hands. But it can show up in other places too.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that it's usually different from those movement problems we see with Parkinson's.
Right.
It's pretty common, especially as folks get older.
Right. And then on the other side, we have dementia. And this isn't really a single disease like tremor today explains.
Yeah.
It's more of an umbrella term
Right.
for a whole bunch of conditions that can mess with someone's memory,
Yeah.
their thinking, their social skills.
Right.
And it gets to the point where it makes daily life really difficult.
Exactly.
And of course, Alzheimer's is the one that everyone's heard of.
Yeah.
But there's also things like vascular dementia,
Right.
Lewy body dementia, and a bunch of others.
Right.
And the main things we see are memory loss,
Yeah.
thinking abilities going downhill,
Yeah.
and sometimes pretty noticeable changes in someone's behavior.
Exactly. Yeah, and we know that things like how old someone is, their genes, their lifestyle can all play a role in the risk.
Right, exactly.
So, that's the background for the big question we're tackling.
Yeah.
Could having essential tremor actually increase someone's chances of getting one of these types of dementia?
Right,
You know?
right.
That's what we want to find out.
Okay, so let's jump into the research here and really try to understand what's going on. So the essential tremor, it seems like it's more than just a motor issue, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, it's not just the shaking.
Yeah, that's a key point that I think is often missed.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the tremor itself because it's so visible, but the evidence really suggests that ET has a much broader impact on the nervous system as a whole.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is that these cognitive issues, the problems with thinking and memory,
Right.
they can actually show up even before the tremor starts,
Wow.
or at least become noticeable around the same time.
Okay.
And, for some people, these cognitive challenges, they seem to get worse over time.
Right. So this kind of naturally brings us to this idea that maybe there's an increased risk here,
Right, exactly.
that having essential tremor somehow might make you more likely to develop dementia.
Yeah, the sources point out that both mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, and dementia diagnoses seem to be more frequent in people with ET compared to folks without it.
Right.
And that alone feels like a pretty important clue.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
It is. And, recent research has really started to zero in on this link, looking at having ET and then the chances of developing dementia later on.
Okay.
Tremor.today highlights the study, although it doesn't mention the specific researchers. But the main takeaway is that having essential tremor could actually mean a higher chance of getting dementia compared to the general population.
Right.
And they use the phrase significantly increased likelihood,
Right.
So it's not just, a small difference.
Correct.
It's a pretty big potential increase in risk.
Yeah, it's not just, a tiny little bit more
Right.
likely.
Right.
It's a much greater chance.
Exactly.
So, what could be going on in the brain to explain this? What sort of mechanisms might be at work?
Well, that's something the source touches on, and it's important to say that scientists are still figuring out the exact mechanisms.
Right.
But one of the leading theories is that maybe there are some shared pathways of neurodegeneration involved in both essential tremor and certain forms of dementia.
Okay.
So it's possible that those underlying biological changes in the brain, the ones that lead to essential tremor,
Yeah.
they could also, in some people, make them more vulnerable to the kind of brain changes that cause cognitive decline in dementia.
Okay.
Another idea that researchers are looking into is that there might be structural changes in specific areas of the brain that are linked to both conditions.
So it's not necessarily that essential tremor is directly causing dementia.
Right.
It might be more that there are some shared vulnerabilities.
That's exactly it.
Or maybe ET is like a warning sign of something deeper going on that could also contribute to dementia down the road.
Precisely.
Well-
And understanding this potential connection has some really big implications that the article talks about. For example, it could change how doctors think about the prognosis for people with ET,
Okay.
how patients and their families plan for the future,
Yeah.
and it might even lead to new treatments that could specifically target cognitive symptoms in people with ET,
Right.
you know?
Right. Right. Now, there was a specific study mentioned in the material, and it involved 222 people with essential tremor who were followed for cognitive changes for an average of 5 years.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty insightful study. What were some of the key things they found?
Yeah, that study gives us some really interesting data.
Okay.
The big finding was that almost 19% of those folks ended up developing dementia within that 5-year period.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really important. The source points out that this rate, this 19%, is 3 times higher than what we see in the general population.
Wow.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real aha moment when you're trying to understand just how strong this link might be. That kind of increase really makes you think about what might be happening at a really basic level in the brain.
Right. Yeah. 3 times greater risk. That's definitely something that makes you pay attention.
Exactly.
And it sounds like the risk could be even higher for those folks who already had some cognitive issues at the beginning of the study.
Right. The study found an even greater risk within the group of people who had MCI, that mild cognitive impairment,
Yeah.
when they started.
Fun.
On average, something like 12% of them progressed to a dementia diagnosis every single year.
Wow.
So that just shows how important it is to be aware of any early signs of cognitive changes in folks with ET,
Right.
because in some cases it might mean things could progress more quickly.
Yeah. So for you, the listener, especially if you're living with essential tremor, what are the practical takeaways from all of this? Like, what should you be thinking about? What should you be mindful of?
That's a great question, and it's one that the tremor.today article addresses pretty directly. The main message is to really be proactive about your cognitive health.
Okay.
It's not about getting worried or anxious, but it is about being aware and taking steps to stay healthy.
Okay. So what kind of proactive steps are we talking about here? What would be helpful?
Well, the source suggests that it might be a good idea to have regular cognitive assessments as part of your normal ET management,
Okay.
especially if you're already a little concerned about your memory or your thinking.
Okay.
Getting a baseline and then keeping track of any changes over time, that can give you and your doctor a lot of helpful information.
Right. Yeah. Just like we monitor the physical symptoms of ET, it makes sense to also keep tabs on how our thinking and memory are doing.
Exactly.
Could help catch things early on.
Right. Early detection is key.
Yeah. What about lifestyle choices? Do those play a role in potentially reducing this risk?
Absolutely. The article talks about how important it is to have a brain-healthy lifestyle. Things like eating a balanced diet, getting regular exercise, doing mentally stimulating activities, those are all really important.
Yeah.
These are good things for everyone, of course,
Right.
but they might be even more crucial for folks with essential tremor given this potential link to dementia.
So the big question, what should someone do if they start noticing changes in their thinking or their memory?
Well, if you or someone you know with ET starts having problems like being more forgetful, having trouble concentrating, or even changes in personality, it's super important to talk to a doctor right away.
Right.
They can do a full evaluation and give you specific advice and support.
Okay, so it sounds like even though the research is pointing towards this connection between ET and dementia, there's still more to learn.
Definitely.
So where do we stand right now, and what's next for research in this area?
The source wraps up by saying that even though we have more and more evidence linking ET and dementia, we don't completely understand the relationship yet.
Right.
We still need more research to figure out those underlying mechanisms, to find out who's most at risk,
Right.
and to come up with treatments that could address both the motor and cognitive symptoms of ET.
Oh, okay.
More research is the key to giving people the best possible care and support.
Okay, so to sum up our deep dive into this information from Tremor today,
Yeah.
it seems like the main takeaway is that current research is really pointing towards a potential and significantly higher risk of developing dementia for those individuals living with essential tremor.
That's a great summary.
Did you say that's accurate?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense if this is bringing up some questions, maybe some concerns.
Right.
The article even talks about the importance of staying informed, staying connected.
Yeah.
Mentions the tremor.today community as a really valuable resource for that.
Yeah, having access to good information and a supportive community can make a huge difference.
For sure.
So for our final thought here as we wrap things up, given this potential link between essential tremor and dementia, what proactive steps do you think would be most helpful for someone wanting to preserve their long-term cognitive well-being if they have ET,
Yeah,
even if they're not having any cognitive problems right now?
that's a great question to think about,
Yeah,
and maybe explore further on your own.
right. Exactly.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
It was great to talk about this.
Yeah, this was really important.